Welcome to the Two Rando podcast, everyone. I'm Chris Crimson.
And I'm Nix. If you're new around here, we'd love it if you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss our future deep dives.
Absolutely. We really appreciate you joining our conversation. And a big thank you to our sponsors over on YouTube, Chris, the Plant-Based, and Emma Advanced.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Your support makes these explorations possible.
It really does.
So today, we're diving deep into something I think is really fascinating, resistant starch. You've probably heard the term floating around, maybe in nutrition circles.
Yeah, I've definitely seen it pop up.
Right. So we thought we'd, unpack what it actually is, where you find it in food, and sort of why it's getting all this buzz lately.
Think of this as our attempt to, cut through some of the noise for you. We've looked at scientific reports, nutrition websites, research articles to pull out the key stuff. No overwhelming jargon, just the main insights and maybe a few surprising facts that might give you those aha moments.
Yeah, our mission today is really to explore this pretty unique type of carbohydrate. It acts a bit like fiber, you see, offering benefits beyond just, basic energy.
Okay.
We'll look at its history, the different kinds, how it actually behaves inside your body, and the potential health advantages people are talking about.
So whether you're, trying to optimize your diet, understand the latest in nutrition science, or maybe you're just curious, let's get started and explore the world of resistant starch together.
Sounds good.
So first things first, what exactly is resistant starch? Lay it out for us.
Okay, so fundamentally, it's defined as starch that isn't digested up in the small intestine. Instead, it travels down further to the large intestine, the colon, where it gets fermented by the gut bacteria living there.
Right, so it resists digestion, hence the name. That makes sense.
Oh.
Was this always known?
Not exactly in this defined way. Scientists started noticing back in the 1970s that not all starch digested the same way. They realized there were different categories.
Okay, so it wasn't just one monolithic thing called starch.
Precisely. They started classifying it into what we now call rapidly digestible starch, or RDS.
Okay.
Slowly digestible starch, SDS, and then the third category, resistant starch, RS. That was a pretty key step.
And when did it get the official resistant starch name?
That came a bit later, formally named in 1982 by Englist and colleagues. Giving it a specific name really helped focus the research,
Yeah, I can see that. And then its journey through the body got confirmed, too.
By 1991, the European Concerted Action Group confirmed it reaches the colon undigested.
Okay.
And then FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization, stepped in 1992 with an official definition.
Which was?
Basically, starches and their digestion products that aren't digested in the small intestine of healthy individuals. Standardizing it like that is important.
And I saw it sometimes included under the umbrella of dietary fiber.
Yes, exactly. Because it functions similarly. It reaches the colon and gets fermented, just like many types of fiber. So scientifically, it's any starch or its breakdown bits that resist digestion higher up.
Gotcha. And it fits into both dietary fiber, the naturally occurring kind, and functional fiber, which is like isolated or manufactured.
That's right, depending on its source and how it's used.
Okay, so resists digestion, reaches the colon, feeds bacteria. But you mentioned different categories earlier. Are there different types of resistant starch itself?
Yes, absolutely. There are actually 5 main types classified based on, their physical structure or how they come about.
5 types. Okay, let's break those down. What's type 1 RS1?
So type 1 is basically physically inaccessible. The starch is trapped inside intact plant cell walls or maybe a protein matrix. Think of it like being locked away.
Locked away. So our enzymes just can't get to it easily.
Exactly.
Where do we find RS1?
You'll find it in whole or partially milled grains, so think things like whole wheat, barley, also seeds like flax and sunflower, and definitely legumes, beans, lentils, chickpeas.
Okay, lots of whole foods there. Did cooking affect it?
It's pretty heat stable, actually, but things like really fine milling or even just chewing very thoroughly can break down those structures and reduce the RS1 a bit.
Interesting. Okay, what about type 2 RS2?
RS2 is about the native starch granule itself. It's uncooked starch with a very specific crystalline structure, like a B-type or C-type polymorph, that's just naturally resistant to our enzymes.
So it's the raw structure that makes it tough. And where is this type found?
Classic examples are raw potatoes, green, unripe bananas, and plantains.
You can give me those, okay.
Yeah, the less ripe, the more RS2. Also, high amylose cornstarch, and some legumes have it too.
But cooking usually changes this one, right? You mentioned uncooked.
Generally, yes. Cooking involves heat and water, which causes gelatinization. The starch granules swell and lose that resistant structure. The exception is some specially bred high amylose maize, which can retain some resistance even after cooking.
Got it. So raw is key for most RS2 sources. Now, type 3, RS3, this one involves cooking and cooling, I think. Retrograded starch.
Exactly. You hit the nail on the head. RS3 forms when you cook starchy foods, gelatinizing them, making them digestible, but then you let them cool down.
Okay.
During cooling, some of the starch molecules, especially the amylose part, kind of realign and crystallize again into a more resistant structure. It's called retrogradation.
So cooking breaks it down, cooling builds some resistance back up. That's cool. What foods give us RS3?
Think cooked and cooled potatoes, cooked and cooled rice, especially white rice, interestingly.
Huh.
Cooked and cooled pasta, bread that's cooled, even things like cornflakes, oats, and barley after cooking and cooling.
And I read somewhere that repeating the cooking and cooling cycle might even increase it slightly.
There's some evidence for that, yes. Maybe not dramatically, but potentially a little bump.
Handy kitchen tip. Okay, type 4, RS4. This sounds more industrial, chemically modified.
You got it. RS4 refers to starches that have been deliberately altered chemically to make them resistant. Scientists might use processes like cross-linking or esterification.
Basically engineering starch to be indigestible.
Pretty much, yeah, to resist enzyme breakdown.
And where would we find RS4? Is it common?
You'd find it as an added ingredient in some processed foods, maybe certain breakfast cereals, some baked goods, snacks, sometimes even beverages. It's used for its functional properties.
Okay, so more of an additive. Lastly, type 5, RS5. Something about fat.
Correct again. RS5 involves amylose, that component of starch-forming complexes, with lipids, which are fats.
How does that happen?
It can happen during cooking or processing when you have both starch, especially high amylose starch, and fats present. The fat molecules essentially bind to the amylose, creating a kind of barrier that blocks digestive enzymes.
Interesting. So what foods might have RS5?
It's more likely in high amylose foods cooked with fats, maybe some traditional grain dishes prepared with oil or butter, and potentially some processed foods where starch and fat are combined.
Okay, wow. 5 different types, all resisting digestion in slightly different ways. So what actually happens when these resistant starches make it past the small intestine? You said they go to the colon.
That's right. Their journey is quite different from regular starches that get broken down into glucose and absorbed quickly for energy. RS bypasses all that.
Okay.
It arrives in the large intestine pretty much intact.
And then it meets the trillions of microbes living there, our gut microbiota.
Exactly. That's where the magic happens, so to speak.
Yeah.
These gut bacteria do have the enzymes needed to break down resistant starch. They ferment it.
Fermentation. Like making yogurt or beer, but inside us.
Sort of, yeah. It's a metabolic process. The bacteria essentially eat the resistant starch.
And what do they produce when they eat it?
The main products are really important compounds called short-chain fatty acids, or SCFAs. The big three are butyrate, acetate, and propionate.
Okay, SCFAs, I've heard those are beneficial.
They really are. Fermentation also produces gases, things like carbon dioxide, hydrogen, methane.
Ah, hence the potential for gas and bloating we'll probably talk about later.
Precisely. And it also increases the total mass of bacteria in the colon, which contributes to stool bulk.
Gotcha. Let's talk more about those SCFAs. Butyrate seems to get a lot of attention.
It does, and for good reason. Butyrate is the preferred fuel source for the cells lining the colonocytes.
So it feeds our own gut lining.
Directly. It's vital for maintaining the health and integrity of that barrier. Plus, butyrate has strong anti-inflammatory effects right there in the colon.
Anti-inflammatory, wow.
And there's ongoing research suggesting it might even play a protective role against colorectal cancer. So yeah, it's pretty crucial for colon health.
That sounds incredibly important. What about the other 2 main SCFAs, acetate and propionate?
They don't just stay in the colon. They get absorbed into the bloodstream.
Oh, okay.
And travel to the liver and other tissues. They have more systemic effects, influencing metabolism throughout the body.
Like what kind of effects?
Well, acetate seems to play a role in things like appetite regulation and energy balance. Propionate is involved more in glucose metabolism and might also affect cholesterol synthesis in the liver, so their influence spreads wider.
So feeding our gut bacteria has effects way beyond the gut itself. And you mentioned stool bulk earlier. Does RS help with regularity?
Yes, it generally does. By resisting digestion and adding undigestible material, plus increasing the bacterial mass, it increases fecal bulk. This promotes regularity and can act as a mild laxative.
And I think I read something about pH levels, too.
That's right. The fermentation process, producing those acidic SCFAs, actually lowers the pH in the colon, making it more acidic.
Is that a good thing?
Generally, yes. This lower pH environment tends to favor the growth of beneficial bacteria like lactobacillus and bifidobacterium.
Ah, the probiotics we hear about.
Exactly. And it can potentially inhibit the growth of some less desirable or potentially harmful bacteria. It helps shape a healthier gut ecosystem overall.
So resistant starch acts as a prebiotic, feeding the good guys, and maybe making the environment less welcoming for the bad guys.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay, this is all fascinating. Let's shift gears slightly and talk about the potential health benefits that might come from all this. Blood sugar control seems like a big one.
It really is a major focus
Yeah.
because RS isn't broken down into glucose quickly in the small intestine.
Right.
It doesn't cause those sharp spikes in blood sugar and insulin that you get after eating, say, white bread or sugary drinks.
So a gentler effect on blood sugar.
Much gentler. This can be really beneficial, especially for people managing diabetes or those at risk, like people with prediabetes or insulin resistance.
And do the SCFAs play a role here too once they're produced?
They absolutely do. Those SCFAs, butyrate, acetate, propionate absorbed from the colon, can actually improve insulin sensitivity in various tissues. They can influence how cells take up glucose, and they can also stimulate the release of certain gut hormones like GLP-1, which help regulate blood sugar after meals.
So it's a two-pronged effect.
Wow.
Less sugar absorbed initially, and then better handling of sugar later.
Exactly. Clinical studies have pretty consistently shown lower blood glucose and insulin levels after meals containing resistant starch. Some longer-term studies even show improvements in fasting levels.
And didn't the FDA acknowledge something about this?
Yes, they issued a qualified health claim acknowledging limited evidence that high amylose maize resistant starch specifically may reduce the risk of type 2 diabetes. So it's definitely on the radar.
Okay, blood sugar control looks promising. What about weight management? That's always a hot topic.
It is, and there are a few ways resistant starch might help, though the evidence here is maybe a bit more mixed than for blood sugar.
Okay, what are the theories?
First, calories. Resistant starch provides fewer calories than digestible starch, maybe around 2 or 2.5 calories per gram versus 4.
So a simple calorie reduction if you swap it in.
Potentially, yes. Second, satiety. There's evidence it can increase feelings of fullness after eating.
Makes you feel fuller for longer.
Possibly, yeah. Which could, lead to eating less overall. This might be due to slower digestion or those gut hormones we mentioned, which can also signal fullness to the brain.
That makes intuitive sense.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else? I think I saw something about fat burning.
Yes, some research, particularly in animal models, but also some human studies, suggests RS might increase fat oxidation, burning fat for fuel, and maybe reduce fat storage.
How would it do that?
Again, it likely involves the SCFAs influencing metabolic pathways related to fat metabolism in the liver and other tissues.
But you said the evidence in humans is mixed.
That's true. While some studies show benefits for weight or body fat, others don't find significant effects. It likely depends on many factors. Like the study design, the specific type and dose of RS used, how long the study lasted, and importantly, individual differences in people's gut microbiomes. How well someone ferments RS could really impact the outcome.
Right, that individual variability seems key. Okay, what about cholesterol levels? Any impact there?
This is another area with some positive signals, but maybe not as consistently strong as blood sugar. Some studies suggest RS can help lower total cholesterol and LDL cholesterol, the bad kind.
How might that work?
A couple of proposed mechanisms. One is that RS might bind to bile acids in the gut. Bile acids are made from cholesterol. So if more are bound and excreted, the liver has to pull more cholesterol from the blood to make new bile acids, potentially lowering blood levels.
Okay, interesting.
Also, those SCFAs, especially propiont, might influence cholesterol synthesis directly in the liver.
So, again, effects both in the gut and systemically via the SCFAs.
Seems likely. A meta-analysis did find that RS supplementation led to modest reductions in total and LDL cholesterol.
But some caution is needed.
Yeah, some reviews point out the evidence might be limited or less consistent compared to other effects. So it might contribute positively, especially alongside improvements in blood sugar and insulin sensitivity in metabolic conditions, but perhaps it's not its strongest suit on its own.
Okay, understood. So potential benefits for blood sugar, maybe for weight, possibly for cholesterol, and definite gut health impacts. How much should people actually aim for? Is there an RDI?
No official recommended daily intake, not like vitamin C or something. But based on research and general gut health principles, experts often suggest aiming for around 15 to 20 grams per day.
15 to 20 grams. How does that compare to what people typically eat?
It's quite a bit higher, actually. Average intake in many Western countries is estimated to be pretty low, maybe only 3 to 9 grams per day.
Wow, so most people are getting way less than that suggested amount.
Likely, yes.
Yeah.
Which suggests there's room for improvement if people want to harness some of these potential benefits. Studies looking at specific health outcomes have used doses ranging from 10 grams all the way up to 60 grams a day.
60 grams. That sounds like a lot. Is there an upper limit?
One review estimated an acceptable daily intake could be up to maybe 45 grams for adults, but tolerance varies a lot. Going very high might cause digestive issues for many.
Right. So how can people practically increase their intake without going overboard or relying on, say, huge amounts of supplements?
Lots of practical food-based ways. The simplest is just eating more foods naturally rich in it.
Which are? Remind us again.
Whole grains like oats and barley, legumes, beans, lentils, chickpea seeds, nuts. Those are great sources of RS1 primarily.
Okay.
Then for RS2, think about adding some green unripe bananas or plantains, maybe in a smoothie.
Right, because cooking destroys most RS2.
Exactly. And for RS3, use that cook and cool method. Cook potatoes, rice, pasta, then chill them in the fridge overnight before eating them cold in salads or gently reheated.
And that significantly boosts the RS3 content, you said.
It really does. Potatoes can increase by around 40%. Cooled white rice can have like 2.5 times more than hot. It's a pretty effective strategy.
That's a great tip. Any others?
Well, switching from cooked oatmeal to overnight oats uses raw oats, preserving the RS2.
Ah, good swap.
Some people use raw potato starch, not potato flour, but the starch as a supplement, maybe 1-2 tablespoons stirred into water or a smoothie, but definitely don't heat it.
Raw potato starch. Okay.
Flours from green bananas or plantains can also be used raw. But the most important tip,
What's that?
introduce any changes gradually. Don't suddenly jump from 5 grams a day to 30 grams overnight.
Right, because that leads us to the potential downsides or side effects, doesn't it? What happens if you have too much too soon?
Yeah, the most common issues are digestive. Increased gas, bloating, maybe some diarrhea or abdominal discomfort.
And that's for the fermentation process producing gas.
Exactly. It's a natural consequence of the bacteria doing their work in the colon.
So starting low and going slow gives your gut time to adapt.
Precisely. Your microbiome needs time to adjust to the new food source. Interestingly, some suggest RS might actually cause less gas than some other types of fermentable fibers for some people.
Oh, really?
But that's variable. People with existing sensitive guts, like IBS, might be more prone to symptoms and need to be extra cautious.
Makes sense. Any other potential negatives? Allergies?
Well, you need to consider allergies or sensitivities to the foods themselves. Like, if you're allergic to legumes, eating more beans isn't a good idea.
Obviously.
And yeah, very large doses could potentially have a laxative effect beyond just promoting regularity. And as always, if someone has a known GI condition, checking with a doctor or dietitian before making big dietary changes is wise.
Good advice. Okay, so it seems like research is still very active in this area. What's the latest? What are scientists looking into now?
It's definitely a hot area. Recent studies, say from 2010 up to just last year, are really digging into the benefits in different contexts, like its role in plant-based diets, refining our understanding of the gut microbiome effects, looking closer at metabolic responses, inflammation. Also, how food processing impacts RS content is a big focus.
And we're getting better confirmation of the prebiotic effect.
Yes, definitely. Meta-analyses are confirming it boosts beneficial bacteria like Bifidobacterium, Ruminococcus, and Faecalibacterium prosnitzi, which is a really important butyrate producer.
Okay.
Researchers are actively exploring its potential in managing metabolic syndrome, prediabetes, type 2 diabetes, looking at inflammatory markers, even its role in mitigating that chronic low-grade inflammation associated with aging.
Wow, lots of potential applications being investigated.
For sure. There are clinical trials ongoing for specific things like chronic constipation, gut microbiome recovery after stem cell transplants. It's broad.
And that individual variability you mentioned keeps coming up.
Hugely important. We're realizing more and more that how someone responds likely depends heavily on their unique starting gut microbiome. This really points towards needing more personalized nutrition approaches down the line.
Personalized resistant starch recommendations. Fascinating. Any long-term disease studies?
Yeah, systematic reviews are looking at long-term effects on things like chronic kidney disease and inflammatory bowel disease. And that large NAAIMS survey study found an interesting link.
What was that?
Higher resistant starch intake was associated with a lower risk of death from cancer and all causes, though not specifically cardiovascular disease mortality in that analysis. So, lots of signals, still lots to learn.
Definitely sounds like a space to keep watching.
Absolutely. The science is constantly evolving.
So wrapping things up then, it's clear that resistant starch is, well, much more complex than just a simple carb, isn't it?
It really is. Its unique journey, skipping digestion then feeding our gut microbes, leads to some really intriguing potential benefits, especially around blood sugar and definitely gut health.
Yeah, it's kind of mind-bending that something resisting our digestion actually helps us by feeding those bacteria. And knowing the different types, and especially that cook and cool trick, gives people practical ways to maybe get more of it.
Mm-hmm. We hope this deep dive has given everyone a clearer picture of resisting starch, what it's all about, and maybe sparked some ideas. It really comes down to understanding how different foods work with your body.
Absolutely. Well, thanks again for tuning in to the Two Rando podcast, everyone.
Yeah, thank you. And if you enjoyed this chat and want to explore more topics like this with us, please do hit that subscribe button.
We really appreciate you listening, and we wish you all the very best.
Goodbye for now.